Hello and welcome to the Eurogamer podcast. It's only the second time I've been able to say that. The first was at EGX last year, where we had like a live audience and it was a one-off and it wasn't on iTunes, and I don't know how many people listening even know that happened. But
I can't believe you went for the history paragraph as the introduction.
Well, listen.
Is it going to be a multiplayer paragraph?
No. I need
Next
to
have the story paragraph.
We don't do that in our reviews anymore, Chris.
I wanted to point out. I wanted to point out that the Eurogamer podcast is being relaunched. This is what we're doing right now, which requires a bit of history because we haven't done a podcast.
No, it's very true.
Well, since I've
previously
been here for that. I think the plan at the moment is for it to go up every couple of weeks on the Tuesday, and we'll see what the reaction is and how we all feel about that. It will be on iTunes, SoundCloud, YouTube, all the places you listen to podcasts. Anyway, I should probably start off by introducing the two other guests on the podcast today. We've got Ollie Welsh, Editor-in-Chief.
Hello.
And the man that had to interject and give me the whole history podcast nonsense is Christian Donlan.
Hello.
I've got an interesting story and I've got something that I want to talk about, which is visiting Riot for the first time, but I think we'll jump into that after some actual video games. So who wants to kick off? Have either of you played an interesting video game? Because I haven't spoken to you in about a week.
I am deep in playing a really interesting video game right now, and it is The Witness, Jonathan Blow's new game.
Hasn't it been in development for like 4 years or something crazy?
A really long time.
Yeah.
I mean, Jonathan Blow's last game was Braid, and that is now some years ago.
Mm-hmm.
It feels like in between that game and this game, you've had the entire
indie
indie games.
Yeah.
This game was The Witness featured in the PlayStation 4 reveal, so that was that must have been early 2013.
I saw it when it was still a mod. And your character cast a shadow, which was like a space marine with a shotgun.
What?
Like I saw it when it was. It may not have been but like a space marine with like a rocket launcher. And that was
they were
how
just
it
like
began.
Filler assets or something.
So this,
this,
it's a fascinating game for a lot of reasons. I'm not going to talk about it too long because I'm technically under review embargo. Also, I'm still in the middle of the game and I haven't fully made up my mind what I think about it yet. It's I can certainly tell you that it's interesting. And it's certainly, I think, moved on a long way from when Christian saw it. Yeah. But the basic concept is the same, and it's very bizarre. You're wandering around a mysterious island, and you're solving puzzles. So it sounds a little bit like Myst, except the puzzles are really totally abstract puzzles that involve drawing a single line from an entry point to an exit point in a grid.
That doesn't sound like that. Sounds like a hacking minigame or something. Is it actually?
It is. It's like if somebody had made a hacking minigame and they were one of the cleverest game designers in the world, and they had spent 4 years doing it. That's what it's like.
I went to see this a long time ago, and I felt two things when going in. I felt that I had been too stupid for Braid. I felt like one of those people who was just a bit too thick to get it. And I also was a bit nervous about meeting Jonathan Blow because he seems quite. He seems like quite a difficult person when you see him interviewed.
Yeah.
And he was captivating and fascinating, and still I sensed prickly, but very brilliant and full of the enthusiasm of the things he was thinking about. And even though I think I probably am too thick for bits of The Witness, I just think what's incredible about him is the way he has set himself, we were talking about this in the office the other day, he set himself the hardest goal for a designer, which is to make the audience feel clever in a way which isn't patronising, and to lead you on this journey where you actually learn something and you become a bit more, you learn how to learn during this game. That's how it felt like.
Yeah.
Is it a puzzle game or is it an exploration game or is it both?
It's both, although if you had to pick one, you'd definitely say puzzle.
Mm-hmm.
It's hard to draw comparisons. It's fairly close to Portal or Portal 2 in terms of a game that has obvious scale and production values, but zero combat and is very much focused on quite involved puzzling.
Yeah.
Where it's unlike Portal is that it is an open world game, and if you get stuck at one point, you can wander off and investigate and explore and do and find something else.
That's the bit that makes that's the bit which makes my head hurt thinking about how he put this together.
Yeah,
that kind of the non-linear thing, but you know that there's still this directed journey through it.
Well, it's fairly simple. Like there's sort of 7. Do you know what? I'm going to stop there because I don't want to spoil it too much. And this is a difficult thing. It's going to be. I've got to say I've got myself a really challenging write-up here because It's a game that is A, extremely difficult to explain, and B, you really don't want to spoil, because discovery of its, not just of the game world, but of the mechanics is absolutely everything.
Those are the games, like, this is a bit of an aside, but those are the games which you just think, why, how to review, like Brothers, A Tale of Two Sons, how do you review what's good about that game?
Yeah.
It's a strange one for me. I can't wait to play it, but I can't wait to play it because I know the person that made it. That is the huge draw for me. Like, if I saw what the video that I've seen of The Witness so far and the way the puzzles work, if that wasn't from a name that I recognised as being this incredible designer within our industry, as I said, like kind of sort of led the charge on what we now think of as indie games. I don't think I'd even look twice.
You see, I think I was the opposite, because I thought I went there thinking I wasn't particularly excited about it, and I felt like I didn't get Jonathan Blow. And when you don't get something, you often think, and I bet it's because it's overhyped nonsense, and I'm brilliant, and I can see through it all. And I was completely converted.
I think to be honest, that would be true until people started playing it. Even if this came from an unknown designer, if people started playing it, the word would get around that it was something unique and quite special. Of course, what Jonathan Blow has brought to it is that there's this extremely bizarre game concept, but Braid apparently made him so rich that he could afford to spend at least 5 years developing it, and it's actually quite lavish. It's a really, really beautiful game. The art style is unique. The settings are wonderful to explore. It is quite pretentious, as you would expect from Blow. Like, there's bits where you're looking at these statues, and there's these little audio diaries and stuff, and it's all very oblique and mysterious, and a bit like wandering around, the Tate Modern looking at art installations. And that would be intensely annoying. But the thing is, it's a really serious video game as well. It's pure puzzling action, and do you know what? Something I noticed. I'd come away from a 2-hour session playing it, and I felt tired. I felt tired and sort of mentally exhausted, like I'd been playing a really intense action game.
Right.
But it's purely through just pushing through these puzzles, and they're hard, and you do get stuck, and then it's harsh. And a few things that I will point out: the screenshot button is your friend. Have a pen and paper, and if you get stuck on a particular puzzle, just wander off and do something else, and come back to it, because when you come back to it, you're like, oh my god, that's so easy.
But that is the most difficult thing to do. Like, it's fine, I'll just walk away. Yeah, okay.
I'm very excited, really excited.
Anyway, so the review embargo is Monday, 6 p.m, and
good luck.
Hopefully I will have figured out a way to talk about it, to describe it, and we'll have decided what I think of it. But I'm already a fan. Although I will say it may not be for everybody, but I'm a fan.
Okay, cool. Shall I switch over to the thing that I teased before? I think there's some interesting stuff to talk about here.
What's that?
Which is, I spent last week at the headquarters of Riot Games, the creators of League of Legends, which I think I'm the only one here that's played League, right?
I played it a little bit when I first got my PC.
Call it League now.
You call it League?
Ever since I visited.
Oh wow!
Now I'm like,
you've changed.
Yeah.
I played
it so thirsty, Donlan. Jesus.
Played it a little bit when I got my PC.
Okay, but really, it's this huge, gigantic game that we don't have an awful lot to do with at the moment at Eurogamer. I think that's fair to say. But there are some such amazing stories surrounding it, and some of those amazing things are the actual people working on the game. I found out. Do you know how many people work just in Los Angeles for Riot Games? Some of them will be working on the mysterious Game 2, which I heard referred to a few times. There was a corridor in the headquarters that I was literally, if you walk down that corridor, your NDA is absolutely fucked. Don't even, just no.
It sounds a bit like League itself, League of Legends.
That reminds me of when I went on tour of Blizzard when they were still making Titan. It was like, do not go over there.
Yeah, well, I imagine that's probably one of the closest examples you can get.
It is.
But yeah, do you want to take a guess how many people work in Los Angeles for Riot Games?
I have no idea.
300.
1,600.
1,600? Oh my god.
1,600 people. It is incredible.
What are they doing?
So many different things. That's actually what I found out. We were introduced to a whole variety of people working for Riot, and they all seem to have such different jobs that all tie into League of Legends. I actually found it really interesting to talk to these people, because often, with game interviews, you speak to a producer and there is a message you're going to talk about, and there are certain things that you hit, and there's not that much to surprise you. But I ended up speaking to so many different people that don't usually do interviews, that do all these weird random things, like the guy that produces music for League of Legends, not for the game itself, but as in digital albums that are released for free to the community. That's his full-time job. He goes out, like they literally released an electronic album whilst I was there with all these incredible artists that the League community kind of had already fallen in love with.
So how much of that is, this is a really cool thing to make our game great and build our community, and how much of it is, we've got this enormous pile of money and we have just no clue what to spend it on?
How much of it is a bubble?
That is a very difficult question to answer. To be honest, I actually thought that about myself, not the people working there. Like they don't need Eurogamer at all. Like the way that League of Legends work, they will never need to, send us a press release with an announcement and then rely on the press to spread their word. Every announcement they do, every patch they do, every champion they reveal, everything is done internally in their own community.
Well, indeed,
spreads the word for them.
They hired my predecessor Tom Bramwell to do just that for them.
Exactly. I think part of the reason that they wanted us there was to try and they wanted us. They didn't need us, and that is quite a strange feeling for a press trip or whatever this was. They have enough money to invite people over to just come and have a look and see what they think and see if there were interesting stories to be told, and that seemed to be the entire purpose of this visit. So it was quite a weird thing for me personally.
I tell you what though, they probably will need us when that game 2 comes along, which may be.
I don't know where you go after League of Legends. It is so unlike anything else out there.
I know exactly where you go. It's the League of Legends branded Hearthstone. That's where everybody's going with everything at the moment.
Yeah. Oh man, I would.
To be honest, I actually trust Riot not to do that. I don't think they would be that derivative.
League of Legends works unlike any other game, with the exception of the games that are directly competing with it. Dota, less so Heroes of the Storm, to be honest. I wonder if the next game, can they even get League of Legends fans to play their next game? It's such a.
I think they've got a bet on that not being possible. I worry about their next game purely because I don't think as an industry people are good at following up things anyway in the games industry.
I just don't know what you follow up with.
But also, you're not good at following up something when your first game was a flop and no one cares. It's still hard to come up with another idea. But when your first game made people a lot of money, there is an expectation that the next thing you do has to make people a lot of money as well, and I think that's poison.
It doesn't feel like a game. It's not a game that would have a sequel. There won't be a League of Legends 2 because League of Legends, and this is actually one of the interesting things that I kind of. We've got a bunch of stuff coming out probably over the next few weeks to do with this, but one of the things I find really fascinating about this game and about the ridiculous number of people that work there is that League of Legends is by many kind of statistics, it's the biggest game in the world. Like the sheer number of players, I think the last time they announced numbers, it was something like 74 million active users in a month or something that's hard to even comprehend unless you compare it to the population of a country. Yeah. And apparently it's even higher than that number, but they've stopped announcing that.
It's just a unique kind of situation. I mean, it's the biggest game in the world, but it is so completely cut off from all other gaming. It's even cut off from the games that are exactly like it, and it's formed its own ecosystem. I remember covering it a bit back in the old days. I remember, to my shame, going to a GDC preview of it. This was back when they did need the press.
Oh, tell me you didn't think it was going to be big. Tell me you thought it was... Oh, what?
No, I was just I don't get it.
Isn't that mod? Remember that mod for Warcraft? It was, no.
I had no idea what I was looking at. I played a game of it. I didn't know what was going on, and I was like, I don't know. I guess
that still happens now. That's a reaction that an awful lot of people have to it.
I think it's really weird. Something is really weird about the difference between games and being an architect. And there are lots of differences between games and architecture. But one of the things is you build a building, and if you've done your sums right, you're pretty certain that it's going to stand up. But when you make a game and it's very successful, it feels that really people only really understand why something worked a long time after it has come out. And that makes making something new really hard. You're back in it again. And you can see, I think the audience reacts slightly to games which have been made too scientifically for whichever audience. When it's been targeted in a way, people have that slightly uncanny valley feeling about it. And I don't think that's at all what League is going to get. I don't think that's at all what Riot are going to get into trouble with. But I think it's just making a second thing is really hard, particularly in an industry which doesn't really think about process very much.
There's so many interesting questions right now. I also don't think League of Legends, I don't see where it stops. It is such a force of nature. And the point that I wanted to make before is that there are all these people working on it. It is the most popular game in the world with all these players, and yet it changes really significantly all the time. In fact, at the start of each year, they have what's called the pre-season. Well, the end of each year and into the start of the next one, they have the pre-season, and they build up for that year's season. And as part of that, they make significant changes, like characters that have played a certain way since the very beginning of League of Legends will suddenly have their whole dynamic altered.
This is the meta, isn't it? And this is what is coming to be understood to be crucial to the success of an esport, but also of this species of game, and not just this genre, but like it's vital to Hearthstone. It's vital to Hearthstone that strategies eventually become redundant.
For a bunch of reasons. You want your players to keep feeling like they have to learn new things. You want the audience to feel like they're watching different things. But I just found it incredible that these huge changes. This isn't just like, so we talked last week. I had a really cool interview actually with one of the champion designers, literally hours after he'd introduced a champion. I'm not talking about introducing new characters, which can have a big impact on the game if they're considered overpowered. Then that may have a knock-on effect on the metagame, whatever. But it's like they are changing some of the core rules underneath that as well, like really important, like building blocks to how the game works. Like
don't they actually kill characters off as well? They've actually...
That was a temporary thing. There was a character called Gangplank, who I found out actually they all their meeting rooms in the headquarters are named after the champions. And outside Gangplank's room, they created a shrine for like the 3 days he was dead. Like everyone at Riot knew it was only a temporary thing, but the audience didn't. Or at
he was
least
dead
sure.
for 3 days.
It was part of...
Seriously, they need to look at their underlying myths.
Yeah, well, I think you want to look into some of the lore behind some of these characters. I'm sure you'll find plenty to question, but the place itself is just incredible.
All right, so bust some rumours for me. Is it true that they've got a park on the roof?
I didn't see a park on the roof, although I didn't go onto the roof.
Everyone has a park on the roof.
They have a secret library.
Oh,
but it's not goddamn secret actually. We wanted to film in there a bunch of times because it's a cool place to do interviews. Like lovely like bookshelves behind you, nice antique chairs. Donlan would have loved it. And people kept filming there all the time, like their own internal.
It's like an open
video teams were always working there, and it was like the least secret thing in the world.
It's like the In-N-Out burger.
Is it true that they've got the staircase from the first series of 24?
They absolutely do. Yes, I couldn't believe it. So yeah, part of
I hadn't heard that.
Part of their campus. We'll get onto that word in a second. It used to be used for like TV production, and yeah, that is just where the staircase from 24, the one that Jack Bauer went up to his office, that's just where it is. And actually, at the top of that, it's quite a nice thing. That's where they keep their various trophies that they've been awarded over the years, which is kind of, there's a nice little thing there, because apparently in the old headquarters, they've moved around in Los Angeles a bit. They used to display all the trophies in the lobby, so as you walked in, you saw this like, oh god, okay, this company's doing all right. Like in the new one, they've replaced that with all references to their communities, like pictures of events and cosplayers and streamers and everything. So you go in, you see the community stuff, and then no one actually goes to look at the trophies because you have to walk up a staircase to do it, and it would look a bit weird if you had to do it. It's literally all that's at the top of this 24 staircase. And so they've kind of hidden them away. They're a little bit embarrassed to like show off, I think.
It's an interesting comparison with Blizzard, obviously a company with which has a lot of similarities, and ties obviously being born out of the mods for a Blizzard game. But I
met Ghostcrawler last
year. You can guess. Oh, did you?
Yeah.
Of course, yeah. You moved over, didn't you?
Yeah. He's a lovely chap.
He's very, very, very smart as well. He also has a real name, but I can't remember what it was. There we go.
Yeah.
I'd sit with Ghostcrawler.
He's a cool dude.
So yeah, the psychology of video game companies by their statuary.
Yeah.
So when you walk into the Blizzard campus, the first thing you see is just a giant bronze statue of an orc.
I know where you're going with this.
So it's like initially Riot celebrated their achievements, and they were like, "No, we're going to celebrate our community." Whereas Blizzard, it's like it's our characters, it's our art, it's our
There's a funny story about that. There's a funny story about that statue though as well.
Is it a statue of Thrall on the wolf? Right?
Yeah, that's right. And there's a funny story that
the name of the
it has their company ethics on a plate underneath it.
Oh right.
And someone quite high up at Blizzard told me, Oh yeah, and you can that ethics plate is made to unscrew in case we ever change our ethics. And I laughed at that point, and they were not joking. They were like, when our ethics change, when we just start sacrificing children to Moloch, it's like that's just going to put that right back in. That's Don't worry, we won't have to change the statue too much.
They do have one big statue as you walk in. It's of the champion Annie, and it is incredibly impressive, as you'd imagine. But there was a sense, so I filmed a bit whilst I was there around the campus. Wanted to kind of give a sense of what it's like to work there or just walk around. And as I was talking it through with one of the guys that worked at Riot, they were really cautious of it looking like MTV Cribs. Like, come and look at all this impressive shit that we've got. Like, look at these big TV screens, or look how many people are working in this room, or look at these statues or trophies. I get the sense that they genuinely are a little bit worried of looking like they're self-congratulating. I don't know. Maybe I've just bought into that, but I found that interesting that they moved the trophies away up a staircase, a very cool staircase, which I was in love with. I walked up and down that quite a few times. Didn't pretend to be Jet Bauer though. Promise.
Did it make you want to play League more?
It did. Yeah. I think that was.
Because you were a Dota 2 man, weren't you?
Yeah. So and that's carried me quite a way, to be honest. This I think actually one of the kind of key things I want to get out of this trip is try to figure out why League is the biggest game in the world when there are companies like Valve and Blizzard going up against them. How have they managed to sit at the top? I think one of the important things that you just can't not consider is that you have so much loyalty to these games because it takes so long to learn them. Like you can't even get into the ranked play in League of Legends for tens of hours because you need to get to level 30, I think, before that even unlocks. And you don't start learning the game. It's like when you learn to drive. You have an instructor. Christian is shaking.
I don't even know what the buttons on the floor do.
Oh God. Okay. Well, when you have an instructor and you're taught to drive, you're taught all the rules of the road. You learn how to use the clutch. There's a person next to you who can stop the car when things are going terribly wrong. That's how you learn. But really, you don't learn the most important lessons until you've passed your test and you're actually having to make decisions all on your own. That's when you start to make like.
Oh, this is like writing for the internet.
Yeah. Well, it's the same for these kind of games. The training bits, like getting to level 30, isn't really playing League of Legends. It's like practicing characters, and then it's only when you get into the ranked game that you even start. So by the time you'll get good at the game, or you think you're good, you're probably still wrong. That's can be 200 hours.
Yeah.
And by that time, you don't jump ship to Dota 2 because you've spent 200 hours with this game and. You've invested so much into it. And I think that is a big part of that answer. And it was something I found a little bit weird coming from Dota 2 to League of Legends, because the same core principles all apply, and I knew not dying is often more important than getting the kills, and I knew how to deal with creep waves and stuff, and all the basic sort of rules. But there's so much complexity on top of that. It's a hell of a game to understand, and I kind of do want to figure it out a little bit more now.
Are you enjoying playing it?
Yeah, one of my favourite anecdotes from this trip was actually that I was late for my interview with Greg Street because Ollie is definitely not going to like this, because I was playing League of Legends. However, I was playing League of Legends as part of the schedule. Like, we were having a sit down with they have a team, like there are a few people that are full time there just teaching people how to play League of Legends or introducing them to it as new rioters. That's what they call themselves. Join. They have someone to make sure they get used to the game, or if they're good at the game, like they can tell them, well, I want to improve on this, and there's someone there that helps them. They have like a personal trainer. So I was late for an interview because I was playing playing League of Legends with someone there. Imagine it was Dota.
Yeah, there's a claw that comes down from the ceiling. Talking of rioters.
Oh, I should also point out the wording is weird. I also mentioned it being a campus a couple of times.
Yeah.
Rather than a headquarters or an office. And when they first said that to me, that is the term they use. For
was it Microsoft who first did that? Were they the first people to call their corporate headquarters a campus?
It's definitely a tech thing, rather than a games thing, I think. And when I first heard it, I thought that sounds really wanky. Like, I don't like that term. And then you actually walk around and you see how the whole thing operates, and everything is open plan. There's lots of greenery to walk around. There are like little meetings popping up everywhere between people, bars and cafes and stuff. It feels like a campus.
I'd love to know what the model for this is, and I imagine it's Xerox Park, but by way of, I think it was probably Caltech was probably the first place, sort of the 1930s. This is a complete side, but like that idea of like the tech utopia.
Yeah.
There's a bit of a park and a bit like a small town, and I think it's probably.
But I mean,
Celtic.
it totally
It's all very
works.
cool. It always strikes me as a please don't go home.
Yeah.
Employees, spend time in your work utopia where you can work.
How culty is it? And it's probably not a fair question, but I'm always interested when you go places like this.
People
always
that
interested
work
by how
at
culty it
Riot
is.
Games, the ones that I met anyway, and the ones that I just saw as they were walking through the campus, freaking love working at Riot Games. It's a lot of these people. It's their absolute dream job, and you can. Like everyone there plays League of Legends. They gave me an example of like their legal department. That wasn't really a requirement for the legal department to play League of Legends because you'd think it'd be such a separate job, and it ended up turning out that as some of the pro streamers on Twitch started becoming more closely associated with Riot and would have like contracts as part of that. The contracts used to say that you can't play games from our competitors, and that happens more than you think with pro gamers.
Oh, really?
If they're attached to a certain game, often.
Yeah, I've heard about this.
Yeah, and it's not uncommon. And the Riot community, the League of Legends community, didn't like that because it would come out that this was a stipulation, and Riot ended up not liking that. And now that's a decision that, from a legal standpoint, makes so much sense because as the leader of the company, you want to serve your best interests. And they were saying that it ended up being that they needed people that understood the game and how its community works, because there are these complex issues. Actually, that ends up making the company look terrible. Like they're worried that people are going to go to Dota 2 or whatever. As a byproduct of that, it's fed into every single part of the place. Like everyone, doesn't matter where you work, seems to like play and love League of Legends.
The culty thing is weird, but then it's a thing that it does crop up again and again, and it always crops up when you're talking about exceptionally good video game developers. Do you know what I mean?
And I think it's also
where people really know their jobs and really good at their jobs. That breeds a certain kind of enthusiasm.
It's very hard to tell the difference as well between a cult and a bunch of people who are just happy.
Yeah. Like you see, like there's a website called Surrender at 20, which is like the MMO champion of League, and I was looking at those guys because I think they were spreading around the interview video for us. Oh, that's nice. I want to go and see how this website works because it seems to be it's a completely third-party thing. Every patch note, it kind of breaks down. Every single bit of news, it does better than Riot themselves in terms of getting out to the community. And you look at the staff page for this website, and like half the people there have now gone on to work at Riot.
Oh, wow.
And their about page will be like, oh, and we're really proud that this person's managed to go on there. Like the people that work at Riot often have loved the game before they.
No, and I think that comes through.
They get them. It's so separate from the rest of video games. It's so different to the rest of video games, and it works for them. They are massive. They are the biggest MOBA.
Yeah. They also run one of the world's biggest sports now as well. So it's just that.
I walked so across the road they have their kind of LA arena, like fairly small thing. It's only like 300 seating, but it's where they do a lot of their live streaming North American tournaments. And I walked into the player lounge and walked into Cloud9, which is like one of the biggest US teams, huge celebrities amongst League of Legends. And I knew that they were huge celebrities, but I didn't like know them. And they knew who Eurogamer were, but they didn't like read us. Like it's a separate thing. And so we were both kind of looking at each other like, I understand who you are and what you do, but
you're a big deal in a parallel universe.
Not that much, which is I thought was really interesting.
Well, that's great. I'm looking forward to seeing more. I want to. It's difficult for a site like ours to cover a game like League for a whole bunch of reasons, but the biggest of them is we cover everything, and League is a topic in and of itself. If you're going to cover it, you kind of have to cover it in a pretty hardcore way, and then you put that in the feed on Eurogamer, which is within a specialist world, is a generalist site that covers all sorts of video games, and it looks really odd. And this is a problem we've had with this. I first encountered back when I was covering MMOs on Eurogamer, and there's only so much World of Warcraft news you can do. I feel like it's crazy that we don't talk more about the biggest game in the world, and that we don't really discuss the fact that it is now a proper sport, and that's a thing that is happening in our patch, and we're not really reporting on it. So I was really glad that we had the opportunity to send you over there.
Yep. It's just a cool place, man. It is a cool place, and I use the word campus unironically, and I'm fine with that. Okay, that was a lot of Riot talk, sorry, but it's an interesting place to go to. Christian.
I think we can segue
You've been playing anything
quite neatly
cool?
to Eve, which I haven't been playing.
Okay.
But which is another game which is nowhere near as successful as League of Legends. But it's one of those games which, again, we struggle to cover, and I think the rest of the gaming world struggles to cover.
Occasionally people look at it and they're like, there was a really big battle today.
Yeah,
it's like,
so this is cool. really interesting. Is Eve is actually becoming a bit of a cliche for like the game which produces, every now and then produces these interesting stories which people can get their head around. You know there's this fascinating game going on, and you know that it's probably over your head, but occasionally you get a little human story out of it. And I think we're always sort of on the lookout for it, because Eve is so interesting that you want to cover it. There's a couple of games which I think are probably the more important games of the moment, which we don't cover. One of them is Dwarf Fortress, which I think is probably, with a benefit of hundreds of years distance, we're probably going to look back and see that as one of the most important games ever made. And we don't cover it at all.
Because it's really ugly and it's hard to
but
get
I
your head around.
I think it's we're gonna. In fact, I'm in discussions with people internally to do something about that. But Eve is one of those ones as well where I think it's actually generating culture, and we don't really cover it very much. But we had a piece go up on the weekend by one of our members of staff who doesn't normally write. What is his role? Is it
James Grant? So he works for gamesindustry.biz, and he does their sort of recruitment, advertising, sales.
But he
stuff.
also does our HR.
But he also does our HR because he's a man who's passionate about HR.
Yeah,
which actually
crosses over perfectly.
Yeah, crosses over perfectly with this Eve story.
But he told me a story a while back that, because I used to talk to him and say, "Oh, how is Eve?" Because I knew that he was playing it very seriously.
Any big battles happened recently?
He once described it. He once described himself as the Josh Lyman of Eve, who is Josh Lyman is sort of the sort of I feel
deputy
like,
chief of staff.
Deputy chief of staff, but sort of became the main character of the West Wing for the first 4 seasons. Anyway. He described himself as that, and I thought it was really interesting. And then a couple of months ago, I asked him how Eve was going, and he said he'd stopped playing because he'd been patched out of it. And it turns out that there is a story connected to this. There was a whole load of rule changes. Eve is such a complex mess of a game that there was an opportunity for the kind of person who really is passionate about human resources to get in there and make a name for themselves, doing something that no one else wanted to do because it was too tedious. And he did that very happily and rose through the ranks. And then Eve changed the game to make it a better game. But at the same time, the byproduct of that was that his role just disappeared. Wow. And it was the first time I'd ever heard of someone being patched out of a video game. And I thought, we've got the story on our website, and it is absolutely fascinating. And James tells it. It turns out that amazingly lucky. It turns out he's a natural writer. And you get this incredible insight into him and into the game. You get a glimpse of Eve, which you can understand, even if you will never understand the game.
He also kicks it off with like 2 paragraphs of West Wing references, so yeah. I'm all about that.
Which when Chris Donlan is your commissioning editor,
it's
always the case.
But I think it was very much because with these things, you're trying to frame them in a way where people have a certain degree of interest in Eve, but they also get afraid the moment you mention something like, "Oh, what's the delivery?" The moment you mention the tick box that didn't get ticked and kicked off a wall, people start to get a little nervous about it. So I think he eases you in very well. But I haven't been playing it, but I've been reading about it. And
how is Eve doing these days? Because I was always under the impression it never made it to the level of World of Warcraft, but it kept hold of people.
Feels like the start of a stately decline.
It's on the slide at the minute. I think it's not that stately. I think it's actually losing subscribers fairly quickly. But you've got to put that in context. So at its height, it was maybe 600,000 subscribers, which doesn't sound like much when there's other games in the millions. But when you're billing €15 a month, is plenty. And also, that game was in growth for something like 8 years. And not even World of Warcraft can claim that. Like, within its niche, it was outstandingly successful. And I remember, like, when I was started on Eurogamer covering MMOs 2008, there was so much hope for this genre, and there was going to be all these massive games would come out of it. And after 3 years, the only games that were still going anywhere were World of Warcraft and EVE Online.
Yeah.
Different scales, but they actually they were different enough from each other, and they were actually developing their audiences. But I think Eve has now, rather like WoW, has now topped out.
Feels like one of the lessons of Eve, though, regardless of its decline, is that one of the things about games which I love is that you can do amazing things in a niche. If you're willing to stay in your niche, you can achieve incredible things. I think.
Yeah, Eve was unashamedly Eve. The thing I always like to hear about it. I don't know how much of this is a publicity stunt or is intended for like kind of feel good factor. I love that they have an annual Eve Fest in Iceland. They pay to bring over a player council each year, which are voted for by the community to represent them in front of the developers. And I just love that idea. Like the Eve developers know that they aren't completely in control of their game, as most MMO developers do. And
tellingly, they were the first video game to introduce a democratic process, and I think in its second year it was subverted by corruption.
But that's perfect. That is absolutely perfect.
Yeah. There's an amazing chapter on Iceland in the not the recent Michael Lewis book, but the one before that, Boomerang, which is about travelling around the world after the last global financial disaster, rather than the one we're about to get into. And partly created by Iceland. And I understood Eve a lot more, even though the article isn't about Eve, it is about Iceland, and I understood Eve a lot more after reading Michael Lewis's thoughts on Iceland.
It is a fascinating place. I've been over there for the FanFest a couple of times, and it's...
He describes them as a horse that's just pretending to be broken, which is amazing. It's absolutely amazing. He's talking about how you instinctively think of Icelanders as being like Swedish people, and they are totally. It's really a fascinating.
Do you know what? Story. Do you know what really explains Iceland for me? They've got no trees. There are almost no trees on the island because it's just completely blasted by these Arctic winds.
It must be above the timberline, isn't it? Is it above the timberline?
Is that a thing?
Yes, I think it is. Yeah.
I guess of course it's got to be. The thing that I have been to Iceland, but the thing that taught me the most about Iceland was Crusader Kings 2, because I romantically tried to start a couple of campaigns there, and there are only about 40 people living in Iceland, and you can't raise any kind of substantial force to take on Norway. It's impossible, and it's taught me everything I ever need to know about the country.
Still, Reykjavik on a Saturday night is one of the best nights out
you
could ever hope to have. Yeah, they are fantastic drinking buddies.
I want to briefly tell you this thing Michael Lewis says about it, which has been criticised by the Icelandic. His take on Iceland.
Wait, hasn't he already called it a dead horse? That's
no, he said it. No, he says it's a horse that's pretending to be broken, in that it pretends that it is tame, and it's not tame at all. He was saying in this sense that the only two indigenous industries there are aluminium smelting or fishing, which are both hard, pretty undesirable jobs. But at the same time, Iceland's education is so well funded that they are turning out PhDs at an astonishing rate. So Iceland is a country which is dedicated itself to turning out the kind of people who will not accept the only work that they actually have. An amazing. His article is incredible. It's absolutely incredible.
Game developers there, other than.
There are some small ones that I think were mostly founded by ex-CCP.
Right. There's not many people there. It's really small. They were recently talking, when the krona got in trouble, they were talking about whether they should adopt the euro or the dollar. And it turns out that in similar size, the currency in the world which has most similarities in terms of its scale and in terms of its liquidity to Iceland is the chocolate money currency you get at Disneyland. It's a really small place.
The population is smaller than the population of EVE Online was at its height.
That's amazing.
That is the best stat. That is the best stat. Yeah. Okay. Your chocolate queen thing was good.
Oh, it's all right. It's okay.
That one was better.
It was off piece. But can I just mention this other game I've been playing recently, very quickly? Sure. So I've been playing this game today called Icebound, which annoyingly, I don't know how much I'm allowed to say about it. It's coming out very soon, and it is incredible. It's very unusual. It is a game that you play with a webcam. And
Christian.
Turn on the game.
Come on, man.
You turn on the game, and it is you are talking to an AI.
Oh, it's
simulation.
Not a sexy thing, is it?
No, God, no, not at all. Okay. Not at all. You're talking to an AI simulation of a long dead author within the world, the fiction of the world, and he has an unfinished book, and the AI is talking to you to try and finish this novel. And occasionally you have your own book called the Icebound Concordance, and occasionally you're holding up pages of this for him to interpret. It is one of the most extraordinary games. I played
cool.
it for about 45 minutes, and all of those 45 minutes felt like new things. Even though it is very much a choose your own adventure, it's kind of click, I want to do this, I want the story to go here, I want the story to go there. So it's very click, 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 going between nodes.
How similar is it to Wonderbook?
It's completely different to anything. It's completely different to anything I've ever played, and I'm eager to play more. We're at the moment, the question is, it doesn't feel like a review would get to the heart of it. So at the moment, you and I were talking this afternoon about how to do something.
Yeah, I think it's
unbelievable. Just Google Icebound and have a look. It's really interesting.
How's it being released if you need a book for it, dude?
I think it was kickstarted. I want to say it was kickstarted at some point. Okay. And they sent the book to me after they learnt that I was serious about playing it. Because it's if you're a small developer and you have to send out a physical book. They're based in Santa Cruz, where my sister was born, and where skateboarding was invented, and where the Lost Boys was filmed.
You are spoilers.
But yes.
Can you come up with a better Santa Cruz fact? Come on, oh man.
But anyway, yeah, it's.
How's that compared to the Playbase of EVE Online?
Pardon me. It's very interesting.
It sounds cool. There aren't that many games with kind of like physical.
It feels like over the last few years, games have started telling stories in a really much more interesting way than before, and like. Her story, I'm still really not sure about how successful I feel her story was looking back on it, but it was an interesting way to structure a narrative. And this feels like another. And the Beginner's Guide was a brilliant example of that. And it feels like people are finally looking, like it reminds me of the way, sorry to go to cinema, but like in the old days, the first narrative films, they filmed them like a play. And then you went through this weird period of like where they were real, like Wings, which is this crazy movie to watch, where the camera's very mobile and everything like that. And it feels like we're going through the Wings stage.
Maybe trying to figure out how do you think, is Icebound going to be limited by the number of
Yes, absolutely. But you can play it without the book. There's very much within the game. He asks you if you have the book.
It sounds like one of those things that you really don't want to play it without.
Well, weirdly enough, the best tricks in it so far, and I do feel tricks is probably the right word. The best tricks in it so far don't require the books at all. It's about writing, and it's about a writer, and it starts with showing you this paragraph of text to lure you in, and then as you're reading it, chunks of the paragraph start to change, and they become different ways of expressing the same thought, and you're watching this thing being rewritten in real time, and it feels like, even though it is just this animation that you're watching of words, it feels like there is an intelligence behind the screen, and you're on one side and the intelligence on the other side. And it's really an interesting way of doing things.
Do you need the webcam then, or not?
I think you only need the webcam if you're going to use the book. I'm completely fascinated by it. I can't wait to see where it goes.
That sounds really cool.
It is really cool.
Yeah, all right.
I'm probably not allowed to say any of that, but so be it.
Right, yeah, they're going there. Yeah, so we're going to get an email from the developers.
Yeah, Santa Cruz are not.
We're really unhappy that you said our game.
It's probably
going to
be the mayor of Santa Cruz turning up. He's like, we're ordering your sister back here right now.
Yeah, revoking your skateboard license.
You need to stop. That skateboarding fact is.
And we've killed Corey Haim. No, too far.
Wow. All right, cool. Well, is any of the games we want to mention? I haven't really played a lot because I kind of just got back. I'm very eager to play more of XCOM 2 with the preview build that we played. We talked about that quite a lot. So soon.
So soon. When is it? February?
The 7th?
I'm excited.
I'm going to get involved.
Maybe.
I didn't really do the last one, so...
Oh my god, the last one's amazing.
Yeah, Enemy Unknown is genuinely a life-changing game for me. It's changed the kind of games that I like to play.
I think I totally agree.
I mean, it also encourages a lot of games to try and replicate what XCOM does, which maybe is part of that.
But what it does is brilliant, and I'm glad I'm glad when people are stealing the 2 actions per turn thing of XCOM. I think good on you. Yep. It was a good idea. I'm glad you're stealing it.
Have you guys played the original XCOM
yes.
with?
Yes.
Well, it's turn points. Is that?
Yeah, action point. It's really it's really a different beast.
I agree. All right, cool. Well, shall we move on to some questions then?
Let's do it.
Yes.
Yeah, so I don't know how we'll do this in the future, but today I kind of tweeted out, send us some nice questions.
Oh my god, you're the Jeremy Corbyn of Eurogamer. This is your new approach to Prime Minister's questions. You're promising a new politics.
We'll probably do it in a similar way on the day. We'll kind of tweet out. But if you've got something more substantial you'd like to ask, 140 characters isn't a lot. You can send a question to podcast@eurogamer.net, which I think is an actual email address.
I've made news to me, so
yeah.
to me.
Yeah,
let's go and make it now.
Okay, all right, sweet. Well, where should we start off? Okay, so we got one from Gareth Wood on Twitter here, also called Robot Soap, which is a pretty decent Twitter handle.
What would Robot Soap even look like?
He looks skeptical by the sounds of this question. With the hype machine in full swing for 2016, what do you think are going to be the biggest disappointments this year? I think we can, as part of that question, kind of start off with, is one of those big disappointments going to be VR? Because this, by the sounds of it, is going to be a pretty massive year for virtual reality.
I think that depends what you're expecting from VR.
Mm-hmm.
So I think for some people, yes. I think people are sort of, the narrative has been VR has failed in the past. This time it won't.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's probably true, but I think it depends what you categorise, how you define success. And people are expecting VR to arrive as this sort of fully formed new form of entertainment, and that's not possible. That doesn't happen. It hasn't ever happened. VR is a very new thing. There was Werner Herzog, of all people, did an interview with the New Yorker about it recently, and he had lots of mad stuff about, like, what does the cockroach on your kitchen floor think when it's looking at you? Is it experience the same reality? All sorts of Herzog-like stuff. But he did say one thing that was bang on, which he says, VR is not film, and it's probably not the future of video games either. It's probably something else.
Yeah,
and I suspect he's right, having played around a bit, particularly with the more evolved VR concepts like you get in Steam VR, where you can move around the virtual space.
It is incomparable, isn't it?
I know, it does make you think, okay, this is just a very different frame of reference, and I'm not really sure how this applies to anything that I'm used to doing in video games. I think there will be good games within VR, but I think VR itself is something different, and I think it's going to take a long time for that to develop.
I would be disappointed if it was just video games leading the way in VR. Yeah. I hope it is a cool space for games, and we're already seeing some amazing things, like some of the smaller indie projects, like Keep Talking and Nobody Explodes, I think is the title. One person's wearing a VR headset, looking at a bomb, and the other person isn't wearing a VR headset and is instead looking at a bomb manual and trying to figure out which bomb they're looking at and how to disarm it. And it's tense and everyone's shouting at each other, and it's something that you can't achieve anywhere else. Like VR, it has added something there, and I'm excited to see lots of that. But I also want it to do other stuff as well. Like, I don't think it just needs to be video games.
I think it's going to start as a niche. It's going to start fairly small, rather than necessarily, now that it's becoming clear that it's going to cost an absolute fortune to get involved, at least with Oculus Rift, or even more so likely Vive is going to be very, very expensive. You need a really, really serious PC to run it.
It's interesting that the PlayStation VR is the one that people are still hopeful in terms of price. We've seen the Oculus price. We know Steam VR has more about it. And
I'm now getting a bit more pessimistic about PlayStation VR. I'm sure Sony's prepared to make a loss on it, but not that much of a loss. And fundamentally, the components going into it aren't that different from the components going into an Oculus. And they're shipping an extra processor with it as well. So I think it's going to be quite expensive. It's still a more mass market proposition, because you can run it with a £300 PS4 instead of a £1,200 PC.
Yeah.
So the cost of entry is still definitely overall going to be considerably lower. Exactly. It's a fixed platform, so there's all sorts of advantages with that. But the worry is that it's going to be the best mass market proposition, but that mass market VR is a thing that actually needs to happen in about 5 years' time. They're kind of too soon with it,
right.
And it will become the new PlayStation Move, because it, again, was just a little bit too soon. I think, like, on the PC, it's really intimidating getting involved with that, but you might have a more of a chance for organic development there.
What I'm interested in, I'm not really that interested in VR, I have to admit, although I've heard like the Everest demo is incredible. But I thought I wasn't interested in Kinect, and I think we all agree that, like, on plugged into your Xbox 360, Kinect was a pretty disappointing thing. But last year, or maybe the year before, I went to the Barbican to see an exhibition of kind of game and artwork, and there was a piece that used Kinect, and everyone who came along, they were projected onto this whiteboard behind them, and then they spread their arms, and they grew wings, and they could fly, and then they walked into another section of the room, and birds came down and tore their shadow to pieces, and it was the most emotionally involving piece of artwork related to video games I think I've ever seen. It was absolutely spectacular. The room was sort of church-like, and everyone there was thinking the same sort of things about mortality and about sort of, you know, the things you love and the things that destroy you. And it used Kinect, and there were a couple of other things in the same exhibition that used Kinect really wonderfully well.
Also,
and
Just Dance, to be fair.
Yeah, and sorry. Yes. But I also think like John at work was sharing a thing about projection onto sculpted screens, and it was incredible. It was like the future of stage magic was essentially what you were watching. And I think a lot of these things, they are cool in an installation or in a museum, and they are not quite as cool when you're trying to get people to make games that use them really interestingly on a regular basis. And I think there's probably a future for VR. I think VR still belongs in the museums, is what I'm saying.
Yeah. The other exciting VR experience I had apart from trying Vive was when I played Oculus Touch, which is their new controllers. They had this setup where I entered virtual space and there was another player opposite me, and I could see his little animated hand controllers and his head moving. He wasn't there. He was actually in a separate room behind me. But being in a virtual space with another person who was talking to me over the headset as well was a really profound experience, and I could see that being used in all sorts of interesting ways. But yeah, I don't know. Like I say, I think it depends on your definitions. I think the technology is there this time. I think it's still a bit out of reach mass market, and that's just as well because nobody's got a good idea of what mass market VR actually is, and I don't think that many people actually want it right now.
Also, there's a concern about. I mean, I have a child. I'm the only person in the room with a child. It's quite unusual in this company. And you do worry more about how much time everyone in the family is spending looking at screens, and the idea that 10 years from now everyone in the family might not just be looking at screens, but they might have like this thing on their head, is like I'm not on board with that, and I'm not on board with that philosophically, and I hope that fails.
That's fair enough.
Yeah. That's such a dad answer.
It is such a dad answer, but I think it's quite a human answer as well. It's this thing which actually doesn't draw us together at all. And take that, Palmer Lucky.
And I know Wes in the office is terrified of wearing it because he thinks he'll look silly, and that's actually sort of an interesting argument as well. Like, are people going to be comfortable wearing VR headsets in their living room on a regular basis? What if there's other people in the room? Like, it's.
That's the weird part of Sony's argument, isn't it? Is they're actually trying to make it a social thing. So their pitch is very much about the social screen, where the people who are in the room with you can see what you're seeing on or possibly a different view on the TV.
Yeah, I think that's really important actually to me for kind of social games. It sort of reminds me a little bit of using the Wii U gamepad. Like you can replicate some of that.
That was I
think it worked.
Oh come on! I think it worked. When the Wii U gamepad was great, it was great.
I tell you where that works. It works in the simulated party environment of a PR campaign. Where that works.
Come on, play Nintendo Land with a group of friends. It is the most joyous thing.
But the idea of putting something on your head and then everyone else is watching on the TV.
My favourite one is it's the HTC Vive, which has a camera on the front now. They've just announced as to try and combat this worry that you can actually see what's going on in the room. But it'll be I think it was Tom Francis on Twitter or something pointed this out, that it'll be a weird thing because of how the camera works. The virtual reality that you'll be seeing will all be in 3D. And will look real and tangible, but the people outside of it won't. And like, what does that do to your brain?
I don't even want to think about that.
Wow. Yeah, that's cool.
I just want to look round corners in racing games. That's all.
Wow,
that's all that VR needs.
Wow, that's what we sold Civilization out for.
Well, that sort of answers Chris Higgins' question about whether or not VR is going to work this year. I don't know. Define work, define success, define disappointment. We're just going to avoid the question. We've got, actually, this is kind of interesting one from Scott Donaldson, who asks, how did you all join Eurogamer? Why did you decide to join? Is that the one that people want to talk about? You both came from Edge, right?
Yeah.
Which is a magazine.
We were both freelancers, predominantly, like obviously not exclusively, but yeah, I think both of us were making most of our coin from Edge before we joined Eurogamer.
Which is a magazine. Read it.
So I joined Eurogamer because...
Come on.
This is because I'd been freelancing for a few years and I wasn't making much money. I was having a really fun time, but I wasn't making loads of money, and I was like, okay, I need to get a bit serious. So on January the 1st, I made my New Year's resolution for 2008 and said, right, I'm giving myself 6 months to find that sort of elusive gig that all freelancers want, that's really easy and really well paid, that subsidises the rest of your work.
I think that's just what all people want.
I know, but it does exist. Like, you land a column, the gaming column for like stuff RIP or something, and they give you loads of money to write 300 words a month. But so I was like, I have to find that, and if I can't find it, to make freelancing viable in 6 months, and I need to start looking for a job. On the 2nd of January, Ellie Gibson wrote to me and said, basically, do you want a job?
Oh, man.
Wow.
That's excellent.
So, yeah, no, I joined because, well, the opportunity was interesting. As I mentioned earlier, it was to write about MMOs, which I'd sort of made my patch and had specialised in a bit, and I thought they were an interesting field. But to be honest, I'd befriended Ellie, and I thought it'd be really fun to work with her and work with Tom, who I was getting to know at the time as well. And I had also noticed that Eurogamer was a company that seemed to like treat its journalists quite well and pay them vaguely sane amounts of money and treat them like...
Those are good reasons.
treat them like grown-ups who could be trusted to go on and do their jobs. So that was also quite attractive to me as somebody who wanted to actually make a living from games journalism rather than just do it for 5 years until I was 28 and then move to PR. So... I think that's how it came about anyway. It's mostly making friends with Ellie and wanting to hang out with her.
That's excellent. Go on, Christian, you got something?
Yeah, sort of the same, I think, except about 2 years behind, which is probably what I should have written on my business card. But it felt there was a definite urge to own my own failures a bit more. That I wanted to be somewhere where it felt like I was. Well, as a freelance, you're it feels like you're just sort of flinging little paper airplanes out into the world, and I wanted to have a bit more continuity in the sort of work I was doing.
Yeah. Also, as people who wrote for Edge, we both quite wanted to have our names on our articles.
I didn't want to, but now I see. Obviously, that's been very handy because now people, absolutely, it's very handy. Now people know who they hate. But I just wanted to be somewhere where I felt like everything joined up a little bit more, and that was it. And I miss Edge a lot. I love it, and it's a great mag, and I learnt such a lot. It was a real privilege, and I learnt a lot, and it's still it's great. But no, it was a pretty easy decision at the end of the day. So
mine's a little bit different. I didn't work for Edge for a start.
Yeah, what the hell?
I started off doing YouTube videos in my bedroom at university.
Oh, you're such a young person.
Jerks. Made such terrible videos as well. I don't think
Are you a millennial? Is that
we've discussed this. He is a millennial.
Yeah. Sorry.
Oh,
and
no, but this generation, I just want to pause quickly to say, Chris Bratt's generation is the loveliest generation there has ever been. I went back to meet one of my old English teachers recently, and he said it was nice to see me, but he said he also wanted to tell me after 20 years that looking back with the benefit of hindsight, I was one of 2 of the laziest pupils who ever went to that school. But he said, your entire generation was so lazy, and you did nothing, and you knew there was an awareness that you were going into a world where there were university places for you, where there were university places you didn't have to pay for, and where at the end of that there were probably jobs for you as well.
You hated me a moment ago, now I hate you.
He was saying,
free university places.
He said you should meet this generation because they're all amazingly thoughtful and thought-provoking people.
We're grafters, to be honest, Christian. That's what we are.
They work really hard.
We didn't have this all laid out for us.
And they know that they're moving into this kind of wasteland where the locusts of baby boomers, who are the people before us, have just come along and chewed up everything.
Yeah, I went through the trenches of YouTube.
I don't think you're allowed to call them trenches. I think you're pushing it too far.
Real hard work. I had to buy a webcam. No, I just made rubbish videos about video games because I liked it, and I kind of liked the community on YouTube, which is a weird thing to say, and I still do actually. Back then, it wasn't a job that you could have. YouTube hadn't really figured out how to make money out of video games, and now YouTube is pretty much just that. And I was just kind of getting used to it. Then slowly YouTube became this viable thing. Websites started looking at video content and realizing they need to embrace it in some way.
We picked up the Bratt phone.
Something like that. And I joined a website called Videogamer, which I was there for a couple of years. And as for why I joined Eurogamer, I remember thinking whilst I was there, I really liked my job, but there were like a handful of websites that I would leave for, and Eurogamer was one of them, and it came up, so I did that, and that's about it. So YouTube basically. People sometimes ask advice for trying to get into this weird career path, and I still don't really know how to answer that, because
I love that our origin story is YouTube and Edge.
Yeah.
My origin story, if you want to take it back to how I got into games journalism, was actually the Edge forum.
Wow.
Oh no, this is
forums.
This is a genuinely interesting story.
Was that before subreddits?
Oh god. Is subreddits? Is that like subtweeting?
Oh god, no! Stop! Please continue, Ollie. I'm not even.
I don't know. It's quite a long story, and I've told it a number of times before. Once, at least, I think, on this podcast or its predecessor.
Sure.
But yeah, no, it was Edge had a forum. I was just a reader and a fan, along with some friends of mine. And this was in like late 90s, when it was weird to post on internet forums, and even weirder to meet people from them in real life. I did both. Ended up sort of knowing some of the people on Edge, and eventually freelancing for it. I still think that's quite a good route into it, is to find a community where you can hang out and where you've got a shared interest. It's harder now because internet communities are everywhere. Then it was like this highly specialised thing where, like, if you were a sort of smart adult who was really, really into video games, you probably read Edge. And if you were like the subset of that was interested in going on a forum, then, well, you're probably going to meet a lot of like minds when you go on that forum, and that's you can't rely on that anymore because all internet communities are huge. But still, I think like finding those people, like if you want to get into any creative industry, you've got to have other people around you with the same thoughts and goals, whether they either want to do it or they're interested in it. You've got to find those other people to connect with.
As a quick side point to that totally still happens on YouTube. Like, I know when people think about YouTube, they think of the biggest channels with the awful comments, but there are these wonderful communities that are passionate about the same things, whether it's like, often like niche games in particular, often have real specialised YouTubers that all talk to each other and enjoy the same stuff. That stuff is out there still. And there are forums still, like Eurogamer has an active forum. It still scares me because I'm not sure if they like me or not. These still exist. Like, there are
they should start a thread to have a vote on it, whether they like you or not.
Jesus, why would you ever say that? That's
sorry, it just came out there.
And yeah, it's not all subreddits, although they are quite a big deal. Shall we end with one last question to wrap it up? Slightly less serious one. Although I asked this to you before and it like immediately sparked a conversation. Yeah. So, Oscar Price from Twitter asked probably the best question we've had. Best game where you play as an animal. Christian Donlan, what is the best game where you play as an animal?
Sly Cooper. Can I also just say we're
counting anthropomorphised animals?
Oh yeah,
I think
definitely. A rare example of a character with a disability as well.
Oh really?
The turtle is in a wheelchair.
Oh right.
In the later games. Spoiler.
Never thought that. Ollie, what's the best game where you play as an animal?
Okami.
Still haven't played that.
You really should sort
that
out.
It looks very pretty. I think that's what everyone says. That's a safe answer.
It's no Sly Cooper though. He doesn't do a spire jump.
Wow, that's the difference.
It's amazing.
Yeah,
it is amazing. It's kind of interminable in a brilliant way, but in a way that may eventually get the better of you, because it's essentially a linear Zelda game that has all of the.
You play as a magical wolf.
You play as a magical wolf.
Right, okay.
I feel Oscar Price.
You're actually a sun god. Who is embodied in a wolf and who's followed around by little irritating sort of.
I mean, Oscar didn't really say what the stipulations on animals.
Also, Oscar, you are an animal.
For asking this question.
Bad news.
My favourite one, the one that jumped to me, is Shelter, which I knew I quite liked being a badger mum and having to look after my.
And that
cubs.
one very much keeps it in the fiction. It's not like anthropomorphized. You're not like
you're an actual legit badger.
Legit badger
with some cubs that you have to protect.
Stripy bastards.
That's all you need. Yeah,
that is a fair point. You've actually played a game where you play an animal rather than a
sun god or
a cat bug.
That guy is definitely that guy is definitely an animal.
Yeah, no, like actual animal games. The only other one like that I could think of was Echo the Dolphin.
Ant Attack.
I think we've all got to grips
with
the fact
the
that's actually
game
rubbish.
about?
You didn't play it as an Ant Attack.
Didn't you?
No.
What did you play as?
You played as like a
commander.
So this Ant Attack, right?
Yeah.
Incredibly, this is like a really, really old ZX Spectrum game from the mid-80s. You could be a boy rescuing a girl, or you could be a girl rescuing a boy.
See,
in Ant Attack.
And you led
rescuing them from what?
You led your boy/girlfriend around by the hand like Ico about 20 years before.
What about Frank the Flea? Frank the Flea, you were a flea. That's a hard game to say the name.
That is true. That is true. Frank I can't say much. Frank the Flea is the Spectrum game that my brother wrote for me for my 10th birthday. That's a story for another podcast.
Oh man, that's a good place to end it. Okay, cool. Well, thank you so much for listening. We're going to be back every couple of weeks. Do let us know what you think of this relaunch. People have been asking for the Eurogamer podcast to return, so hopefully
Now they'll be like, we were wrong.
Be like, yeah, you know what, it's fine. Yeah, we'd like to hear what you think. And if you want to ask questions next week or anything like that, we will let you know how to do that. So, yeah, thank you very much. And thank you to Ollie and Christian for being the first kind of guests. Is that the right word? Guess is a weird word to use. I mean, you work here. You're my boss. I don't know.
People who had to do it.
Thank you for also being on the podcast. You were lovely.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.